Hello, we're going to be continuing on building on the Red Sky Quick Start. So in this lesson, we're going to go over inputs and how we use our RS form control and a bunch of other of our standard inputs. It's a little bit confusing at first, but once you get it, it actually makes it quite nice. So here's where we left off. I'm going to actually go back into the code now, and I'm going to delete a lot of that stuff that we added there. And just kind of delete these guys. What I want to do is I want to actually make a separate component that's going to hold a sign up form. So let's say we're going to sign up a new user inside the dashboard, which obviously doesn't make sense because we're already logged in, but again, this is just for testing. So what I'm going to do here is I want to create a sign up control. So I'm going to go leave my pages folder and go to my components folder, and I'm going to right click, new directory, and we use camel case for our directories. So I'm going to say sign up control, hit enter, it creates an empty folder, right click and say new file, sign up control. So we use Pascal case for our React components. So first letter should be capitalized along with each word. .tsx because we're using TypeScript, and hit enter. It'll ask me if I want to add this to my Git repo. In this case, I'm going to say no. And so now I can start typing all of my controls and components and stuff. I've created a really nice little shortcut. It's called a live template in PHP Storm. There's other equivalent stuff in VS Code, but I'm going to type new component. And it just kind of fills out all the guts there, and it's waiting for me to type, so I can just now type sign up control and hit escape. And so now I have my actual sign up control. Now with React and the way we like to do stuff, we like to have our top level containing component there to have the class name RS for Red Sky and then sign up control. If we right click, we can also create our SCSS file. And so I'm going to say sign up control.scss and hit cancel there. And I'm just going to say SCSS. Again, another quick complete sign up control. So now I have my base level stuff that's going on in here. I'm going to come back here and just for right now, just going to put some text in and just say sign up control because I want to see this work real quick. I want to go and add this to the dashboard page. So outside of these boxes, I can collapse that box there. I'm just going to say sign up control. It auto completes. There's no props, so I can just kind of close it off there, deleting out stuff that's not being used again. But let's go ahead and go back here. Refreshes. There's our sign up control. Great. So now what I want to do is I'm going to come back to the sign up control. And let's start adding some labels and some inputs. So I'm going to say label, and if I hit tab, you can see it auto-completed and added on line 4, the label component that I'm importing. Get a variant of, I don't know, an H6, and say name. Again, I can just tab away and I can see that it should just say name there. That looks great. Now I want to bring in the input. So if I say input, there's our React, our standard Red Sky framework input. And this one actually pre-populated with 3 different required parameters. So there's the type, the look, the control, and some other stuff that we're going to add here. So the type, I'm going to say, so you can put single quotes, you can hit control space, and you can see the different ones that we have here, but it's just going to be a text for here. The look, if I hit tab, go to the look, I can do the same. I can say it's a filled or an outline or a none or a standard. Let's just try filled and see what that looks like. Control, that's going to be something that we're going to have to add now. So let me take a second and explain controls. Essentially, with React, you have 2 options. You can have a controlled input or you can have an uncontrolled input. React really recommends having controlled inputs, but what that means is that for the standard input, the value is being controlled by React state. So thus if you change the state, the input automatically changes. And then what you do is you listen for on change handlers, update your internal React state, which would therefore change the value of the input and you'd see it. So we really prefer controlled components. However, we are going to do some updates to our framework to allow uncontrolled. But you basically essentially pass in a control here. So let us first close this off because I'm tired of seeing that little red error there. We'll still have this one there, but I'm going to create a state for React. So I'm just going to type state, again, another shortcut I've created, and we'll call this the name control. I come over here, we use an RS form control is our standard form control. And then we can start importing some of these things that are missing, Alt enters, and usually we like to have that capitalized right there. So there we have that, but we have to, on initialization, the default value, we want to say a new RS form control, and we'll give it a key. So we'll say name right there. So just basically a string key value. And then we can give it an initial value, which I'm not going to. I'm going to say it's an empty value. And then finally you have an array of validators. So it's optional, but so I can leave it off and that's going to be good. And maybe that's what I should just do right now is I'll just leave that off and get back to there in a second. So there we have our control now, and I can take this control, this name control, and paste it in here. But there's a optional setting that we're going to want to use, which is when the input changes, we need to update that control. So it's going to pass back to us a new control, and we're going to set it in this React state. The nice thing about setting it is it'll cause the form, this entire control, this component, this sign-up control, to re-render, and thus we'll see the input change as we type and stuff. So that's the minimum that we'll need to do kind of an input. So let's go ahead and tab over and see what it looks like. So there we have it. This one is obviously a kind of a big, darker, kind of dark mode input. And so as I type, I can see my text in there and everything looks great. And there's my name input that I could have there. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to add a button kind of down at the end. Actually, I'm gonna add a couple more controls here just to kind of show you. So I'm going to say name, and maybe we're going to add an email underneath that. And I'm going to copy this guy, paste it down there. But if I just leave this as is, just to kind of show you, if I come down here and I refresh, you'll see, you know, the name and the email, they're kind of smashed next to each other. But as I type, you can see down here, it's the same input that's changing there. And that's because we are using the same name control. So a couple little things. I'm going to add a margin top to this guy, as we saw in the last video. So maybe space that out a little bit. And I'm going to duplicate this guy, and I'm going to have a email control. So set email control, and maybe change this to email, and so now I can start using these. So come down here, email control, set email control. So now we should have two independently working inputs. Type there, and we're all good. But what we want to do though is we want to now possibly take this control and have maybe a submit button. So I'm going to add a button down here at the bottom, and again, once it recognizes it doesn't know it, you can hit Alt Enter, bring it in, and this time I'll do a outlined primary, so you can just kind of see the difference between a contained and outlined. And maybe we'll put a submit in there, and we see what it looks like. There's our submit. And notice it has no kind of padding there. Maybe we might want to pad that or space it to this side. So let's do that. Let's just quickly add a box and a box there. And So one of the commands I just pressed right there is one that I commonly press. It's the prettier command, which does the auto formatting of your entire code. It's kind of nice because if you have, tons of spaces, you can just kind of prettier it up and have it space things out, and such. And you'll want to get used to using it, because when you commit it, we have some Git hooks that will force prettier and make sure everybody's consistent in how they do stuff. I'm going to add an on click of a function, so handle submit there, and again I'll do create that function, and that's good. So but I do want to space this button towards the end, the bottom right. So I'm going to add a little bit of a margin top of maybe 32 pixels. I'm going to display flex this guy and justify it to the flex end there. So if you look at it, he should be spaced over here, kind of down there on that. One of the things that I don't like is I don't like how these things smash up against the pad over here, or up against there. And so I'm going to actually add some padding to my component. So one of the things we do is we never add margin to the outside of the component from here. We always let the page be the one that controls the margin of it. So I'm going to control click, go in here, add a little bit of padding of maybe 24 pixels. Let's see, your top bottom, I don't really need any padding there, but maybe on the left and the right, I'll add some padding, and we'll go see what that looks like. There we go. Looks prettier, kind of brought it in a little bit there. If we really want, we could again add a border of 1 pixel solid. Here's one thing. So we could obviously say black, and that'll give us our black border there. But we might want to use some of our standard colors that are all around it. And now I'm kind of seeing that the padding top and bottom, if we're going to pad it and have a border, we probably want to do padding all around. So go like that. But we have, you see this import that we have up here, we have our themes folder. And if we actually go look at our themes file, you can see we have white, ivory, all these different kind of gray scale settings. And so you'll work with your designer to figure out what is the right kind of colors you'll use here. But I'm going to just go back here and do a theme var, and I'm going to do like maybe a light gray for my border. It might be. So let's go and change it to a, maybe a dark gray. Let's see what that looks like. There we go. And so now I have kind of more of my form in there. Again, I type in here, hit submit, does nothing. Let's go back. And so now, let's say we want to get the values from these. So if I want, I could get a name value from it by using the name control and get the value. And so value could either be a number, or it could be a string, it could be an array. And so the easiest way is to kind of cast these to a string there. So now we know it's truly a string. We kind of do the same with email. Email control value to string. And let's console log these out. Name, email. We go like this. We hit enter. We see nothing. But if we put in a name and blah@email.com, we can see both of those being printed out there. So that is how you can actually get the values out of the controls. But one other thing that will happen is if your form actually continues to grow more and more and more, you're going to get a lot of different individual controls that you have to kind of pull the values off of. So what I'm going to do here real quick is I'm going to first, I want to change this to like a real form. So the nice thing with a real form is if you actually add a form around this, so your standard HTML form. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in an on submit callback. So when they are typing in, we're going to call it handle on submit. But basically when you hit the enter keyboard command, we're going to actually have it automatically call our on submit. So typically you do action as the the page that you want to kind of post this information to, but that actually causes a problem in a standard React application. So what we have to do is we have to pass in a form event and say prevent default. This would stop the page from reloading after that on submit was called. And then one thing that we still need to do is we need to come down here and put the type equal to submit. And so that should make it now. If I come here and do a Jim at jones.com and hit enter, you can see down there Jim at jones.com was called there. So that basically is effectively put it at our button that we have there. But what happens if we type in an invalid email? So if we just type in some gibberish, we still get this function called and kind of no notification or error warning on there. So that's where our validators could come in. So I'm going to come up here to this email control and add that extra validator in there. And so we're going to say a new RS validator, and we need to again import that type. And we're going to say, well, what type is this validation? So we have an RS validator, and I come down here and I can say it has to be an email, and then I have to put my error message. Let me format that. I have to put my error message in there. So I could say invalid email, and that should be good now, but it's still not going to validate it. Well, actually it might. Let's see here. If we come in here, we type blah, 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 and we tab away from it, you can see that it has invalid email down there. If I fix it though and start typing, it should clear out and do that. And so we have this validator that's kind of feeding in there. But one thing is that I'm not really checking the validator in my on submit. You can see it, the submit still kind of takes place down there. So what I can do up here is I can check right here first. So I can say if email control, let's see here, dot validate, and it returns a promise. So I'm going to have to change this function to an asynchronous, and I'm going to have to say await the response of that. And I want to see if this is a not, if it's not valid. So if it's not valid, then I want to possibly do some sort of message or there. Right now I'm just going to console log it, invalid email, don't proceed, do not proceed. And I'll just return it. So we're not going to spit out that, we're just going to kind of spit out our error right there. If I do that, run, type in there, type in invalid email, hit submit, invalid email, do not proceed. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stop since this video is getting a little bit long, and I'm going to split this next section up, and we're going to learn more about form groups. So hopefully this is helpful in our journey of learning more about the framework. Thank you.